And I have really been looking forward to this discussion today. And I last week I was at an event in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and there was a lot of our audience members that were there. I was kind of blown away by all these people that knew who I was, and I hadn't met them yet because they were on these discussions. And one of the women that I met was like, how do you get all these great topics and discussions? And I have to say it's thanks to you all, is that scheduling time to brainstorm with me is what led to some of the best discussions that are out there. And Robert Leach, who you're going to meet in a moment, is part of that group. Is Robert and I had a little brainstorming session, and he said something that really triggered me because I'm a parent and I've got kids, and he's just there's and I'll let him articulate it, but he sort of opened my eyes up to the gap that the way that we are communicated with as caregivers to our children through the schools and the daycare centers and things of that nature seems to be on a little bit different level than the way that we're communicated with in the elder care world. And I love it when people bring up perspective like that. And I said, let's have a discussion on this. And so without further ado, Robert, let's get you on stage here. And for those that, and I hopefully I didn't botch that introduction, but that's really one of the main reasons why I've got you here today, is that it's that conversation we had in that comparison of being a caregiver to your child versus caregiver to the elder. Robert, before we dive into the things that you're going to share with us, let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve, and thank you for those who joined to see the talk today. A little bit about me. Actually have a slide about it. I'm DC born and raised. Let me show you here. DC born and raised. I live in New York at the moment, although I split time, so I'm back in the Maryland area often, from Rockville, Maryland, actually. But 2 generations Washington, DC. My interests include technology, music, Latin dance. I also love to travel as well. So I've been to 60 countries now, and hopefully have a chance to see some more over the next few years. In terms of professionally, I'm a data and a product guy. Over the last 20 years, I've built data-driven products. And one of those products we'll talk about today, Tuesdays.care. It's an app for care workers and caregivers. But before that, I brought a few other products to market. I love technology. And I was introduced to the senior care industry through a personal experience. And we'll talk about that today. And then after that experience, I became a researcher, and I started investigating the industry, and I made some observations. And so I'm looking to have a kind of a dynamic discussion with the group today to kind of put observations on the table, discuss potential solutions. And, at a very minimum, after this talk, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is below. You can screenshot this slide here. It has my email, and always feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'll drop your contact info into chat as well. But awesome. Well, Robert, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to duck behind the curtain here, and if you want to sort of get going, and feel free to take a pause break at any point during your discussion, and I'll let you know if there's any questions or comments that we need to address.
Yeah, very good. And Steve, in terms of interactivity, in the Zoom chat, for those who have, I'm just curious to know, for those who have children under 10, maybe you guys could react with one of the smiley faces, just so I can just start to get a sense for the group that we have here.
Let's see. Okay, so folks, well, actually here, just type into chat if you have a child under 10 right now, or what if people have had children uh who are
Yeah,
obviously
no. Well, let's go with now because I think what's compelling is there's there is, for those who have kids under 10 now, you may have brought them up in an environment where there's more technology for communication and
got
connectivity.
it,
And so,
got it. Okay. Well, at this point, and this does not surprise me, Robert, we don't have anybody responding that they've got kids under 10. Um,
got it.
which I think is going to make your talk even more eye-opening to us in terms of what is available.
Very good. Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Um, I wanted to start off with a quote that I think is thematic, and we'll come back to this as we go through the talk. But invest in the human family, invest in people, build a little community of those you love and of who love you. So I think I may have flashed this, and there might be a teaser, but um, this is a famous quote from Tuesdays with Morrie, which is a famous book, a famous play. It came out in 1997. Um, it's fantastic if you haven't seen it. It's really a story about life. Mitch Albom is a journalist, and he spends every Tuesday with Maury Schwartz, who's one of his old mentors, who is dying of ALS. And so he goes, he gleans lessons of life from Maury, and it's a fantastic book. And that's one of the famous quotes from the book that I really love. Build a little community of love around the person that you care about. So today we're going to talk about three things. I'll go through a case study where observations from a caregiver and a researcher, that's myself. I'll come up with some observations and pain points and some benefits that I've seen in the industry. And then in addition to that, I'd like to have an open discussion about care workers, caregivers, and technology, and how technology can potentially be used to fix this new pandemic. And let's talk about that. Maybe that's a good place to start. So 85%, this is a statistic that was baffling for me to learn. And for those who don't know what this means, 85% is the annual turnover rate amongst senior care workers. Now, I discovered this through interviewing operators of homes, and then through research, I actually found this specific stat. And this was really, really eye-opening to me when I began my journey of understanding the senior care industry. And operators, I know there's many operators on this call. I know they do a lot to try to, lower this number, to show appreciation and show have employee wellness programs. But it seems to me, based on my research, that the 50-cent raises and those type of things are not really moving the marker in this area. And so one of the main things that I want to talk about during the discussion portion is how, as a group, we can come up with ideas to really impact the care workers in the industry. A bit about me, we already talked about. So let's jump into the case study. So the first case study is Marilyn P. Not surprisingly, I mentioned this is a personal story. So these are some pictures of myself. And let me give you a bit about the profile of Marilyn. So she had Parkinson's disease for about 12 years. And for 9 to 10 of those years, it was a very manageable disease, just a slight tremor. But for the last 22, 25 months of her life, she started to develop Parkinson's-induced dementia, or Lewy body dementia. And at that point, me and my family, which is listed below here, there's 4 active members. We knew my mom needed a bit more care. And so in March 2020, 3 years ago, nearly 3 years ago exactly, was the first time I ever walked into an assisted living. And it was an 8-person home in the Maryland area, and it was absolutely fantastic. Um, I had a very good, my family had a very good experience interacting with this operator. So all the observations today are really just observations on the overall systemic problems in the industry and not specific to this operator. We really had a wonderful experience, and I continue to keep in touch with them, and I'm very grateful for them. But despite having such a good operator and despite having such an active family, we still there were still some pain points that I wanted to bring to the table today. So I've kind of summarized these into 4 observations. So the first observation was, over the course of those 22 months, um, my family mostly lives in the Maryland area, but I live in New York. So for the first year that my mom was in this assisted living, I traveled back from New York 41 times. So just about 3.5 weekends a month. And that kind of leads me to my first observation. Getting a general status of, how my mom was doing was very difficult. And it created a lot of stress because I would jump on a train or jump on a bus and travel down 4 hours. And it was very, I didn't know exactly what to expect. And for those of you who are in elderly care, there will be days when your loved one has a bad day, or maybe they're napping all day. And those are like basic status that I would have loved to know, and I could have altered my travel schedule. I could have kind of planned a bit better, and also to give me a little bit more comfort, knowing what I was walking into. And for those of you who've had firsthand experiences visiting a loved one who's aging, sometimes you actually don't know what's behind that door after a given week or two where you haven't seen your loved one. So unanswered phone calls, and a lot of times poor visits just based on the characteristics of the illness. A second observation, and by the way, that also, even though I was kind of traveling from far away, that also affected my family who was 10 minutes away. Oftentimes they would stop by and the visits were very poor quality visits, and they'd have to leave. The second observation I wanted to point out was staff turnover. Now, the operator that my mom was at they were actually very fortunate. They have a lot of 20+ year employees, but even despite that, some care workers came and went, which is typical. As I pointed out in the beginning, 85% turnover. And why is that important? It was very hard to form what I call a basic acquaintanceship with these care workers, right? They're doing hard work, and yes, they're wearing name tags at times, but oftentimes it's really hard for the family to actually have acquaintanceships with them and remember their names and just have small talk. And really, I think that does matter, and I'll talk about why that matters later on. But I did notice a bit of turnover. The third is, someone who had never been exposed to this before. I was really, really surprised by how stressful their jobs are. And it gave me a very, very great appreciation for the type of work they do. Things in particular that are kind of just invisible to many people that I was surprised by is the amount of public transportation that many care workers use instead of having their own cars. Very surprised to find out that many of them work 2 to 3 jobs. So after a 10-hour shift or an 8-hour shift, they would oftentimes be leaving to go to another caregiver job. So very, very difficult job, very, very stressful job, more than I really was aware of until I saw it firsthand. And then the fourth observation I made was there wasn't a frictionless way to show appreciation, right? And these people are doing hard jobs. They're caring for your loved ones. Of course, I said thank you. Oftentimes coming down from New York, I would bring some bagels. But outside of that, there really wasn't a great channel, except for one thing, and that was the holiday donation. Now, I haven't used my checkbook in 10 years. And when the holiday donation came around and it was communicated via email, the only method to provide that donation was via check. And so I dug and I found my checkbook right when I found out that they were accepting donations. And I got out my checkbook and I wrote a small check and I wrote a small card. And it was extremely meaningful for me to do that. And I did that for the 2 years that my mom was there. But I think what one lesson learned is, how could that be a more frequent thing, and how can that frequency actually help with overall employee wellness? So these are some of the key observations. Now, when I was going through this situation myself, I was in it, so I wasn't really problem solving. But my mom ended up passing away, and that's when I kind of stepped out of the caregiver role and more as a researcher. And that's what led me to my next two case studies here. So just two more case studies to go through. So the next one actually has to do with a Parkinson's patient who's 82, and they are aging in place. So they have 24-hour care, and they've had that for the last 2 years. And they also have a very active family of 4 people. And the big aha moment with this one is the adult children of this patient, they have children of their own. They're that typical sandwich generation where they have 2 young kids under 10 and they have aging parents. And it was a very stressful situation for them. We'll call him RRG. And the husband, who is experiencing Parkinson's, is married. And after a very stressful situation, eventually they got in-home care, and the wife went on a 2-week vacation just to kind of unwind and kind of get away, and de-stress. And I was talking to the adult son, and I asked him, "How is your father doing?" And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, how do you not know? Like, you have 24-hour care." And he said, "Well, my mom is on vacation, so I haven't gotten an update." And that was really my aha moment, where I realized that, anything short of the care workers giving their cell phone numbers to the adult children, it's really, really hard for these adult children to stay up to date and just get that general status about their loved one. And so some of the findings with this case study on the left here were, again, difficulty getting basic updates. There's not a need for an hourly update, but maybe like a daily roll up or even a weekly roll up would be useful. And better communication. So as I mentioned, this case study, the adult children had young children, right, under 6 years old. And you know, he would have liked to expose his children to his grandfather, of course, to their grandfather, but just having a little bit more information going into that visit would have helped him, so that he didn't, get into a situation where it would have been a, less than optimal visit for his children. And we'll come back to this, but I'll flash it now because I think it's worth noting. But let's just take a moment to contrast this. And again, I was asking who has children, but for those who do have children under 10, you've probably interacted with an app or a series of apps, childcare apps. And one of them, or there's two very popular ones. One is called Brightwheel, and the other one here that I have pictured is called ProCare. And these are applications where parents can get hourly updates, or weekly updates on their children in daycare. And they can memorialize those milestones, but more importantly, they can just get a general status. And in addition to that, for those of you on the call who maybe have pets, this is actually a technology that also exists in pet care. If you take your dog to doggy daycare, there are technologies that allow you to get just basic updates. Okay, and then I'll switch to the last case study, and then we'll kind of move into our discussion. But the last case study has to do with Isidore, and Isidore is also a personal case study for me. He was my 98-year-old uncle. Now, why this is important is because I'm not part of that nuclear family of his children. or his grandchildren, but this was a man who really meant a lot to me and my sisters for that matter. He was 98 years old, so he's actually more like a grandfather. But in short, towards the end of his life, he went to nursing care, and in order for the extended family to get updates, it was a series of fragmented emails and text messages between myself and my cousin, an email with all my cousins, um, you know, Isidore's daughter, and had a separate text message. And so, again, for those who have firsthand knowledge, it's a very fragmented communication channel. And again, it was very difficult to get basic updates, especially towards the end of Isidore's life. And it would have been very, very wonderful to just be a bit more integrated into his end of life process. I think that would have helped with just the overall grieving process. And it would have just been nice to stay a bit more connected towards the end of his life. And so with these three things, case studies, and I've done some more, but these are the three that I wanted to highlight today. I wanted to kind of bubble it up to two main findings. And again, for those of you who are on the call who are operators, this probably doesn't come as a surprise to you, but the two main consistencies across my case studies and interviewing operators were, number one, communication is usually the chief complaint between families and operators. And number two, and probably more importantly, care worker retention is emerging as this new pandemic. So COVID is, we've kind of moved past that pandemic, and I think operators who are likely on this call are really experiencing this retention issue. And I know there are programs that are actively underway to address this, but it's certainly a finding that was surprising to me. So I see some activity in the chat, but with that, I just wanted to move into open discussion, Steve. So maybe we can
Yeah. No, great. You've really brought up a bunch of talking points. And I think as I had said at the beginning, what intrigued me when you sort of presented this topic is, and we have to be careful when we think this way, however, because we don't want to infantilize elders. So we don't want to compare older adults to children or pets. However, what we want to reflect on is I can get an update if I'm on the list of a caregiver for a pet. I can get through, if my pet care provider has the technology in place, I can get around the clock updates on the status of my pet and what's going on and this, that, and the other. And so it really makes us reflect on how can some of those sort of systems be in place for our loved ones. And I think for the most part, we all would deserve that, and it would create a more efficient system. Now, so we've got Natalie from StatCare, who's on the discussion, and StatCare is some technology that folks can look at. That's a monitoring system, and we featured StatCare before, and she was saying, as you were sort of sharing your story, that StatCare would have been a wonderful tool because it has passive monitoring of mom and folks when they're living in a community. But Natalie, drop in the link to StatCare and select everyone, and that way folks on the call can learn more about that technology. Joe says, how do we balance our desire for information with the HIPAA regulations?
It's a good question.
Okay.
It's a good question, and that's actually, I'm gonna jump to this third discussion question just to kind of set the table, since we're talking about technology. But how can we bring technology to elderly care? StatCare seems to be one solution. So, Joe, I think there are drawbacks to any technology, and I don't think this is a silver bullet, but HIPAA in particular is an overall process. And so Tuesdays.care, which is an app that I'll demo at the end of this, we are in the process of becoming HIPAA compliant. All of our data is encrypted. It isn't a HIPAA compliant system, but HIPAA is also more than technology. It's also processes. But one thing that, I think there are solutions for this, and, it has to be balanced because people's privacy is very, very important. And that's actually, if we just kind of contrast, let's extend this for one moment. There are existing solutions out there that, maybe many of you have seen, and that is, and this is kind of part of the Tuesdays that care app, but what do operators do in the meantime? The Stack Care is a very pointed solution, but for those of you who work with operators or have family members in assisted livings, there's really three main activities that take place for communication that also may kind of fall into that gray area with HIPAA, and that is email lists. Typically, non-sensitive data will go out via email lists. There's typically Facebook groups that are private or public. The public ones clearly are groomed a little bit better. And then the private ones, they're very useful, but they're not tailored, and they're not, in my opinion, private enough. And so the frequency of the updates tend to not be as flow in as frequently as maybe necessary. And then lastly, SMS, which maybe that's not on, maybe that's kind of under the table or under the board, but it happens, right? A lot of families collect the text messages of care workers because I think they're trying to find ways to stay connected. And I think HIPAA is a key thing for any solution that gets brought to market. But thank you for that question.
Yeah. And so the Joan, I'm intrigued by this, her comment where she says, having done a skilled nursing facility social work for 21 years, I feel there are many factors you haven't recognized which impact communication between staff and family members. Joan, with your experience, it would be awesome if you would be interested in sharing some of your perspective. And I think probably the best way to do that is if you just raised your virtual hand and allowed me to open up your mic, you might share some of, oh, here we go. All right, Joan.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for being on the discussion. And it would be great, with this topic, if you could share some of the challenges and solutions, or sort of give us an insider's view of life in a nursing home and communicating with families.
Wow. Well, first thing I want to say is that working in a skilled nursing facility these days, I'm sure is even harder than it was when I left the facility where I was last working 4 years ago. It has only gotten harder over the years as facilities really concentrate on rehab now to make ends meet, and the turnover is just incredible. So the staff is under an amazing amount of pressure to get everything done, to care for people effectively, more than adequately, hopefully, and complete the documentation that's necessary, for all the regulatory, requirements. So I think time constraints are really a big factor, and often the nursing staff or even the social work staff really need to go through one family member, because if they're getting phone calls from multiple family members throughout the day, it's just absolutely impossible to just communicate to everyone who wants information. One thing that can work when there are multiple family members that want information is to set up a time, perhaps for either one or multiple family members to do a conference call, set up a regular time when the staff feel that they will have the time to speak. And that way everybody, plans for that time. But to think that a family member should be getting, or many family members should be getting communication on a regular, frequent basis is just not realistic. There are HIPAA concerns, of course, and then the suggestion that direct care workers should communicate by text really, I think, puts the facility in jeopardy and doesn't always give a clear picture of what is really going on. I have known of many situations where direct contact between the resident's nursing assistant and the family has caused major problems because of perhaps their perception or a lack of professionalism, motivation for communicating directly to that family. So I don't think that's the answer.
Yeah. Well, Joan, this is awesome because I think you're validating, I think, a lot of the points that Robert is bringing up from a first person perspective is that and that's the thing. I think that's what intrigued me about this discussion today is here's the system that we're in and what can be done to improve this, because the picture that you're painting is not ideal for a worker, an employee, and it's not ideal for a concerned loved one either.
Right. And in the very beginning, it was stated that, raises perhaps are not enough to show appreciation. But I do think that adequate pay is really important and does go a long way. And I don't mean small raises. I mean, people who work in facilities are doing such difficult and stressful work, and they are definitely not paid at all levels, all staffing levels. They are generally not paid enough. No. And that once a year, holiday fund is certainly not the way to make people feel valued.
Yeah. Well, Joan, I really appreciate you sharing your comments. This has been awesome. I want to make sure that we get
absolutely
folks, but thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So Robert, that was really interesting, and I think it really validated a lot of what you've discovered as well. And granted, she's in a skilled nursing facility, which is a bit different than the case studies you presented, the assisted livings. But if anybody's ever had a loved one in a skilled nursing center, the feelings and our desire to be connected and the fact that family could be spread all over the country is the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to a lot of those observations, Joan. Thank you for that perspective. Yeah, it's fantastic feedback.
Mike Kerrigan says, have you studied the stressors and challenges that family caregivers have faced? You shared some of your own personal perspectives on this.
Yeah, I haven't studied it formally. I've felt it myself. I've witnessed it in family friends. Yes, going through, dealing with an aging loved one is a stressful situation, and I was very fortunate to have a close family and a very involved family. For those who don't have that support structure or that incubated arena, I can really empathize with them. For only children, I can really empathize with them. it's a very difficult situation to embark upon. We had a care manager that was somewhat helpful. I'd actually like to do more research around the effects on caregivers themselves. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and it's kind of something that I think many people will go through.
And I want to share Madhu's comment, and Madhu says, I'm 75 years old now and I can manage my life, but going forward, I have concerns on how I'm going to navigate my life if there's a change in healthcare. And I think, number one, Madhu, the fact that you are willing to sort of think about that is just such a bold and courageous step, because most of us are sort of in the ballpark of, hey, I'm okay now. I don't need to worry about any of this stuff. And every story that you hear of somebody that lands in a nursing home or an assisted living, they were feeling good, just the other day, and then it's a fall or a change in health, and all of a sudden they're in the system. And I think the expectation is how can we make this system one that where communication is easier between providers, between care workers, and between uh, all parties involved. And the interesting thing is, again, I've done no research in this area, but I talk anecdotally with hundreds of families over my career. And the interesting thing that you reference about care workers texting families on how mom and dad are doing, while that can go wrong, most people that I talk to who say, oh, I actually had a wonderful experience at Shady Acres Assisted Living because we endeared ourselves to Cindy, one of the caregivers, and she would always keep us in the loop on how mom was doing. She'd send us little videos. She'd send us texts. And to Joan's point, that facility is putting themselves at risk when one of their staff is doing that. The caregiver is putting themselves at risk for their job. The family appreciates it and things are going well. But as Joan said, things could turn between the relationship between the family, the caregiver, and the client. And it's really not an ideal situation.
Yeah, I very much agree. It's a workaround. These care workers are going out of the way to inform the family, which sometimes they're trying to relieve stress, right? There's a lot of anxiety and stress in the situation, and these care workers go above and beyond and do that, but they are going off the board, and it does put them at risk. And that's where like a HIPAA compliance solution could potentially fill that gap.
Yeah,
potentially, right? I don't think it's a one size fits all.
no,
I want to be clear on that.
And I think there's going to be lots of solutions, like we referenced with Stack Care and other, methods and things like that. But let's, because I know we're burning through the clock here, and I see a few questions regarding the app that you're creating or that you've created. Give us a little bit of a
little demo
on your thoughts, and then we can give you some feedback.
That'd be fantastic. So, yeah, and I see there's a question from Nicole around. I think this is a good segue. So her question is, you have to designate a family member as the point of contact. It's kind of quarterback the care, and set clear ground rules for communication. So that was also my experience, and I do believe in that. But I guess the question I want to pose to the group here, I think that is the status quo. I think that is the as is solution. And if we can just imagine, what will 10 years look like? Like, will we keep this same paradigm in 10 years, in 20 years? Or will we push for some innovation where there's better dissemination of information? And so, again, I don't think it's a one size fits all, but let me introduce you to Tuesday's Care. This is a art of what's possible. This is a version of what could fix some of these pain points. We are currently in proof of concept mode. We are being used by a customer. We're in stealth mode. We're not public, but we have one customer, one family using this with their skilled nursing. So this is not a part of an operator at the moment, but one of the asks today is if you're operator on the call and if you fit the profile, you're under 40 residents and you're interested in potentially joining our pilot, I would love to talk to you afterwards. But let me take you through the demo, and I'd love to collect some feedback. This is very early days in our prototype, but we know we get instant updates on our children. Not the exact same scenario or persona, but it is something. We also get updates on our pets, but with our aging loved ones, we really haven't innovated. And unless you're the point of contact, you are a bit disconnected from them. And the current methods with email lists and Facebook groups and caregiver SMS, again, that's kind of off the board. And I think there's a better way. And so one way
Here's a quick demo of Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.care. So I'm going to roll the demo. Steve, if you don't hear the audio, let me know, but otherwise I'll roll it.
Got it.
Here's a quick demo of Tuesdays.care. It's an app for better connecting to your loved one in a senior facility and for showing appreciation to care workers. When you open the app, you get a feed that only the circle of care can see, and you get basic updates about your loved one. You can see my mom exercised. I'll go ahead and heart that. Elton came to visit. Let me go ahead and give a comment. And just like that, I have peace of mind, and I have all these moments commemorated in one central place. Now, I'm also able to show gratitude through kudos. I can give a shout out to the whole staff, or in this example, I want to let Ruthie know that I appreciate her. Let me go ahead and thank her for getting my mom ready for her lunch date. Finally, we know care workers really have a hard job, and I can have a giving subscription that's not revealed to them, and it's not on an individual basis, but it allows me to contribute to a communal fund, either a coffee, a lunch, or a ride share on a one-time or weekly basis. And just like that, I'm contributing to overall employee wellness and appreciation. Let's take a look at the staff side of Tuesdays.care. When I open the app, I can see my residents and my communities, and with just a few taps, I can add moments and add posts. In this example, I'm going to go ahead and add a nap, select all the residents that took a nap, and just like that, it's updated on the feed for family members to see. Now I can also add a post. Now content moderation is absolutely key. And so this is built into Tuesdays. Let me go ahead and add a post here. I'll go ahead and select a photo. And every single photo that gets posted has to be approved by one of the operator administrators or a staff admin. That ensures safety and privacy for everyone. Okay, now as a staff admin, the first thing I'll do when I open Tuesdays is go to awaiting approvals. I'll go ahead and approve this post. Looks kind of funny. But this one here, there's other residents in the background, so I'm going to go ahead and reject that. I can also moderate content in the feed directly. So if I see something added by mistake, I can go ahead and remove that. Or perhaps there's something a bit too sensitive and I want that out of the feed. I can go ahead and remove that as well. As a staff admin or operator, I can set my preferences for how I want to run my community, and I can see the data and analytics that show how staff and families are engaging. I can see which communities are receiving the most kudos and the most donations. And I can also look at this at the individual level too. And that's Tuesdays.care. It's about adding value to family and staff, getting insights into your customers and your employees, and building that culture of appreciation that increases employee wellness. Sign up for the pilot.
Okay, that was a lot. A couple things I want to point out just to be crystal clear, and I'm glad to take questions, and I can walk you through some live functionality as well. But the first thing I want to point out is the giving subscription is entirely separate and private and anonymous. So the actual care workers are not tipped. They're not aware of your donation. This is just you could think of this as your holiday donation in a more frequent way, and it's delivered to the operator, and the operator can take those funds for employee appreciation in any way they choose. So this is not an individual, even though it's kind of, I wanted to abstract away this whole, like, I'm tipping you $5 or I'm buying you an Uber. So it's not focused on the monetary. It's, I want to buy you an Uber. I want to buy you a ride share, or buy you a coffee. That's really just kind of a way to make it a little bit less transactional, but that is just a way to donate on a more frequent basis to the operator in general, not the individual.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think I appreciated your comments on that, and also I reflect on, like, what intrigued me by this conversation is sort of the systems that are in place for our children and our pets, and how can we borrow certain things and practices that are standard. And one of the things we read about it in the news all the time is that teachers are generally underpaid, and they're out there going to Office Depot on the weekends buying supplies out of their own pocketbook. And when families hear this, what do? They donate and they support. And I think creating something that makes it easy for not just on holidays for us to get involved is not a bad idea. Now,
yeah, Steve, if you've ever seen, I mean, whoever's gone to get a salad or get a smoothie or gone to Starbucks in the last year, you've probably seen this screen.
now, the converse of that, that I can see is that, and I haven't viewed the chat yet, but one of my other conversations that I have a lot with families is how expensive these places are. And so it's sort of like when your kid goes to an elite private school and then the PTA hits you up for, another $500 or something like that. It's, but at the end of the day, if you feel like you're able to make an impact, that's very cool.
Yeah, and it's really about the kudos. It's about the thank yous. One thing that I learned in the research is that, for jobs that are hard, and specifically for jobs that are hard and unseen, like the work is kind of unseen, what happens, in the showers, in the bathrooms, in the actual residence room. Showing appreciation is even more important, right? Some people work for money, some people work for appreciation, most people work for a little bit of both. And the fact that Tuesdays is really centered around kudos, sending gratitude, and there's also a giving subscription as well, but really it's centered around gratitude and thanking the care workers.
Mm-hmm. Mike asks, who pays for the app, the family or the caregiver's family, or the facility?
Yeah, Mike, it's a great question. I mean, this is a product that I built to solve a problem. How to create a business out of this and monetize it is not even something I'm brainstorming at the moment. So for all of the pilot families and the pilot operators, this is free of cost, right? We're in proof of concept mode.
And Sharon brings up a really valid point, and I don't know if you've looked into any of these, Robert, is the resident care management systems. These are sort of these, software packages that some of the providers are subscribed to, that manage their management systems and their budgeting and things like that. I could see if somebody on the call had some connections or one of those packages that you could work on integrating with, where this could be an excellent add-on.
Yes. So thank you for that question, Sharon. There's no integrations at the moment, but it's something I would love to explore. In talking to the many operators I've talked to, they since there's not as much innovation in the industry, they're flooded with point solutions, and they're really looking for an integrated solution across the board. And so I think long term, the vision for this product would be to integrate into some of these systems. So yeah. that's definitely on the roadmap.
And I think a couple of questions and comments related to sort of the management aspect of it, in terms of who's going to be taking the time from the community end, the facility end, to do that management. And I think folks, that's one of the things that I think will be discovered and managed in as more pilot projects are added in Robert's vision for this.
Yeah, that's right. I would say, let me just touch on two comments there. The goal is for this to integrate, to not change the existing process. So this would ride along with that process. And from my experience and my research, there are executive directors at certain homes, or at least kind of someone who's in charge. And so it would take the same moderation or the same hierarchy that exists in a facility, however the facility organizes it. This would ride along in that process. We wouldn't be changing a process. And that's actually one of the key feedback points. For those who are familiar with social media, this has a lot of it's borrowed a lot of design elements from Instagram and some of those social apps, because training employees who have an 85% turnover is difficult. And for those of you in facilities, you'll notice that people are on social apps. And so the goal is to have it very quick, very intuitive, not much training needed. And then the goal is to have it ride along with your existing management processes.
Yeah. And as I was reflecting on this and you were going through your case studies, and I saw the photo of the place where your mom was living, what struck me with the platform you're proposing is how there are so many of these small residential homes that are out there, and they're doing an amazing job of caring for our loved ones, because a lot of times there, it could be anywhere from 5 to 15 residents. They're all in close proximity. There's relationships being developed between the caregivers and the residents, but a lot of these homes do not have the complex resident care management systems. It's basically they're caring with love and hugs and and things of that nature. And so I could see where this platform could really knock a lot of those smaller residential communities up a notch very easily. And I think that probably your personal perspective from experiencing the care of your loved one in one of those smaller homes is your design is could be a great solution for those smaller homes.
Yeah, I hope so, Steve. And also I wanted to point out, there's a comment around moderation. So I've designed in the ability to only make this about, so there's really two components here. Moments are one tap activities like exercising or food. There's no associated media, video or photo that goes along with that. And so actually the current pilot family is using it mostly for moments, not photos, right? Photos do introduce a little bit more moderation, but just to know that, hey, my mom showered today and she took a nap, and maybe she said something funny, they can put in a quote. Those are some of the basic updates that alleviate stress in the families and require a little bit less moderation. And so, yeah, this is all configurable with the from an admin standpoint. You can turn off posting of photos completely.
Yeah. And, folks, the cool thing is you can participate in the pilot free of charge. The other cool thing is that I think today's discussion has really definitely opened up a dialogue in my mind on we can do better than the current systems that we currently have. And is technology going to be, any one technology is going to solve all those problems? No, but definitely getting Joan on and hearing her talk about, the challenges of being a skilled nursing center as a social worker it's
Yeah.
it's sort of like we can do better than this. And so, Robert, hats off to you for giving this a try. And I really hope that some folks who are either on this call reach out, or
Yeah.
if you're hearing this as a recording, reach out and let's get involved, and let's see what kind of excellent ideas we can come up with.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Thanks. And I'll leave it here on this slide with kind of 3 tips that summarize really what Tuesdays.care is looking to do, but also just generally technology aside, I definitely kind of have these 3 takeaways for those who are caregivers, which is, build those acquaintanceships, show gratitude. It's especially for these unseen jobs, it's particularly important. And I think the families can continue to encourage the operators. They have a hard job. They do have a very difficult job, but encourage them to innovate, because I think the innovation has to be kind of encouraged from the customer side. And in this example, the customer in many ways is the family who's caring for their loved one.
Yeah, and Selena has a nice comment that everybody can read in there that says, she's an APS specialist, and how it would give me peace of mind if I could get daily personal updates from somebody if mom is being cared for. And yeah, I think we're moving in a great direction. And I think sometimes we sort of hit a brick wall because, well, this is the way that it works. Okay. Like we accept this is the way that it works. But especially when we talk about nursing homes, the general model of nursing homes that is out there right now is basically very similar to the operating of those nursing homes back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, we're definitely progressing. We're getting better, but I think we've got a lot of opportunity to better utilize technology and dream about what could it be? Because I love it, Robert. It's like you bring up the fact that in your wildest dreams, could you ever imagine that your pet could be at a daycare center and you could be working in your office and watching your pet play in a little playground with other pets throughout the entire day while you were working? I could never have imagined that. And so we need to look at elder care with the same lens. So, wow, we've done an hour here. Robert, any final words that you want to share?
No, thank you for the time. Again, this is a proof of concept. It solves a specific problem and set of pain points that I witnessed and then validated through a few case studies. But I think it takes, again, we have the opportunity to define the future. In 10 years' time, I think there will be a different landscape. And it's for us on this call to help define that and design that landscape. And so I'm open to ideas. I'd love to get more people on a pilot. So feel free to reach out. And again, we can kind of define what this future looks like in elderly care technology together.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And we'll see you at another discussion. Robert, thanks for joining us and really getting us thinking. And the recording will be up later today, along with contact information for Robert if you want to get involved with the pilot. All right.
Thank you, Steve.